one day after getting a court injunction against some of these predatory, not just the lenders, but the predatory landlords and slumlords that were operating in our communities, but also in the brown community, in the red community, in the yellow community, in the white community. But one in particular was Morris Goldsecker. Morris Goldsecker is some called Gold Seeker. And some of you still some gold suckers today getting into bed, claiming to be having some partnerships with the Gold Seeker Foundation, who said that the money would go toward providing affordable homes after, of course, all of his crimes against our people in the city of Baltimore. But I don't think Kim Trueheart and some of these twacktivists that's getting into bed with them will tell you about the legacy, the real true legacy of Morris Goldsecker. But we'll go deeper into that, if not today, on another day for sure. But they're still around in terms of these foundations, as just as you see the Harriet and Janet Weinberg Foundation, talking about some others that was taking cold advantage of our people and exploiting our people. And, of course, operating on white fear, creating white flight, and creating urban blight, and taking advantage of those policies that they were working in the dark, coming into the light. But it was men like the Honorable Walter P. Carter who was confronting them, not afraid to confront them, and then exposing them. So let me see if we can go to this one of the clip as we're talking about. The Honorable Walter P. Carter, again, commemorating him on this day, 42 years ago today, that he lost his life in the city of Baltimore. It says he died July 31st, 1971, as he was given a report to the Black United Front at Reverend Vernon Dobson's Union Baptist Church. The previous day, Carter had won a court battle against Morris Goldseeker. Goldseeker had sought an injunction against Carter, who had been picketing and leading protests outside of Goldseeker's office, calling on him to stop the black tax. Well, the Honorable Walter P. Carter knew then it was a black tax. He knew in 71 what they was doing to us and doing to others were a black tax. And here we are in the city of Baltimore in 2013, and all of the conditions that he was fighting then are still existing and remaining today. So the question is, what happened? I know in the 60s and the 70s you were singing, I ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. But if these conditions are still existing today, then know that many of you and plenty of you that walked with Walter P. Carter, that was laboring with him, that toiled with him, have been turned around, and have not even taken the opportunity to teach your children about this great man. But again, he said it was a black tax. So clearly, when we look at what your mayor's doing for the developers in the city of Baltimore, just as Tommy D'Alessandro was doing then, just as Schaefer would do, just as Smoke would do, just as Martin O'Malley would do, just as Sheila Dixon would do, right on up to this one that's sitting down there today. It's still a black tax and, of course, a bunch of leeches. I think in the scientific community, they call that a taxonomy. They call that a taxonomy, when you have leeches that's just continuously leeching off of the people. I believe they call that a taxonomy. Check the word out for yourself. But this is what Baltimore has been reduced to, thanks to the light of the Morris Goldseekers and others. But it goes on to say, again, that the Honorable Walter P. Carter said, referring to the excessive fees charged in this rent-to-own schemes in an effort to scam blacks out of their rights to home ownership. And they still running these scams today. They still got these $1 down and $1 later. $1 down and $1 when I catch you. And if you know, if Goldseeker didn't catch you, Goldberg would catch you. If Goldberg didn't catch you, Goldstein would catch you, or Bernstein would catch you. $1 down and $1 now, $1 now and $1 later, as Brother Malcolm said, and later is always now. But let me keep going. Goes on and says he worked, of course, with the likes of the Honorable Congressman Perrin J. Mitchell. Says that the Honorable Walter P. Carter protested against these and other discriminatory housing practices. And most of what we saw going on, it says Goldseeker had a notorious history also of engaging in a practice known as blockbusting. Now, I know some of you young folk don't know what blockbusting is. You think we talking about the video store business that went out of business. But that's when they move one black family on a block and then tell the wife, y'all better hurry up and get out of here because the jiggers are coming. The jiggers are coming. You better hurry up and move up out of here. And then Goldseeker would get the whites to sell to him for a much lesser price, and then he hiked the price up 3 times as much to sell it to black people, or he would tell black people you can rent to own and you never own it. In the South, they call it sharecropping. But this is what these northern dogs were doing to our people. And so we still see that going on, unfortunately, today in the city of Baltimore. But again, we're stopping on this day to commemorate the Honorable Walter P. Carter. We'll open up the line shortly, but I want to get into this piece as I talked about Willie Don Schaefer, because 71 was a critical year and a pivotal year along with 1999, when it was our opportunity again, after Schaefer was the mayor, and Smoke, of course, who was their hand-picked boy, who came out of the club called the Lancers Club, which was headed up by Judge, what was his name, Hammond? Judge Hammond, who many know later on came out was a pedophile. And many of them boys that was in that Lancers Club would never tell you what happened to them. Most of them was hand-picked to go on to City College, and then when they got to City College, they was hand-dipped, if you know what I mean, swimming in the nude, and many of them were raped, ripped off, dipped off, and yet they didn't even tip off the generation coming behind them. Whatever you do, don't go to City College. Don't go to these elite schools and get into them these so-called elite pools, because you got to swim in the nude. Now, what man want to be around boys swimming in the nude, man? Unless he had a plan to rip off some booty and arrest their development, or to break them like you break a horse on a farm, like you break a horse or a slave on the plantation. Because most of it went down on the Eastern Shore before they brought it up here to Baltimore. And you know what I'm saying is true. You just don't want to talk about it. But any self-respecting black man that went to City College or Poly and these schools where they had to swim in the nude will tell you, yes, what that brother was saying on the airways is in fact true. You just ain't going to admit whether it happened to you or not, because some of you have become enablers in terms of what Hammerman, Schaefer, and some others over there at City College were doing to you. You don't want somebody to believe you was this big brute. And somebody turned you out at the root in terms of, again, what was going on at City College. But again, as I said before, you had those who became the swindlers in this city. That it was Willie Don Schaefer, who Jack Pollock and Irv Colvin put in. You can go and read the articles for yourself. I won't get into it. They said if Schaefer was just flaky, they call him flaky or shaky. They would set the elections. They would determine who was going to be the winner. And if not, they would pay the judges. They would pay those who would count the ballots to say that Schaefer was their man for 16 years in the city of Baltimore. And then his good friend, what was the guy that was there? Gene Rayner. His good friend down there. We'll say it, Ledge. Gene Rayner that was down there at the Board of Elections before he died, him and Rayner was living together down there. We'll say Ledge. Before he died, him and Rayner was living together down there. Had a place down there at the harbor. We'll say Ledge. But today, so you have those that's willing to come forward that wasn't there in that generation then, that's not afraid to come and say publicly what they say privately that they won't tell you. But again, you tune to the state of the city. But let me get into this as I go forward talking about Willie Don Schaefer and the swindlers, man, that swindled the people. And this article, as I shared with you before, comes out of Lyndon LaRouche organization, the Schiller Institute. It's called The Death Zones in Baltimore. I'm not going to read all of it to you, but I'm going to give a little of it to you as he talked about, and they talked about in exposing Willie Don Schaefer, the Greater Baltimore Committee, and, of course, the political mob bosses that stole this city and stole everything that wasn't nailed down. So if you want to know why your schools look the way they look, why your communities look the way they look, why your recreation centers look the way they look, why all of those institutions that you're supposed to take care of that make for city government look the way they look, William Donald Schaefer and the swindlers. Willie Don Schaefer and the swindlers. That's why. The only thing you got uptown was the trash ball. Them little trash cans they used to put on the corner. Used to have a song talking about hook shot, dunk shot, put it away. Got to play that trash ball every day. That's all you got out here, Schaefer being down there in the mayor. You had a few blacks, got a few patronage positions. For the most part, the black community suffered under Willie Don Schaefer. Look at Emerson Village today. He lived in Emerson Village. Damn, you would think if he lived in Emerson Village, he would give to Emerson Village. Look at Emerson Village today. They had to go and clean it up when they brought him through, that old crow that was in that coffin doing a Baltimore poor tour before they put him in the grave. And see Negroes falling over the cat. Oh, Willie Don Schaefer. Willie Don. After all his pain that he left in this city. You'll be doing the same thing for Martin O'Malley when he finally croaked. You'll probably be doing the same thing for Sheila Dixon when she finally croaked. And you'll probably do the same thing for that one down there today, the daughter of Pete Rollins, when he croaks. But I once heard Pete Rollins say that he admired the Honorable Walter P. Carter. But you would think that his daughter would do the kind of things where they say the apple don't fall too far from the tree. So let me get off of that. But let me get into this article, man, before I open up the lines. Talking about the Greater Baltimore City swindles of Schaefer, Jack Pollock, Irv Colvin, the Greater Baltimore Committee, which was set up in 1955 by 83 white businessmen. And they set it up and established it in that, what's that old racist country, what's that racist country club up there on Charles Street that blacks probably still can't get membership in. Martin O'Malley had his brother had his wedding up there, I believe. You know that old racist. What is that one? It'll come to me. You know that old racist one that's sitting up there on Charles Street that they still don't want you working. If you of a certain complexion, you can't work in the front. You got to work in the back. But let me keep going here. It says the Greater Baltimore City swindles. How did this deliberate destruction come to pass? Being a superb mid-Atlantic seaboard site 12 miles inland from the Chesapeake Bay, Baltimore was ideally situated to remain a national rail and water transportation hub for coastal and ocean freight into the Midwest industrial heartland. But under various urban re-intervention swindles, the shift out of the industry and shipping into service was enforced in Baltimore, right in line with the national post-industrial downgrade of the economy. It says during the 1950s, then William Donald Schaefer, who was again moving on to the city council, is when he came in around the 50s on that city council. It goes on and says, the Wall Street financial crowd spoke of the Greater Baltimore City vision, referring to the tourism and entertainment projects projected for the city, intended for maximum real estate looting and subsidized by city tax funds. Welfare. It says there was the Charles Center, which was the first thing they built. That's why they got Tommy D'Alessandro's statue up there. They don't have one statue of him up there. They have two statues up there because that dumb worked with them swindles to swindle this city for the money, millions if not billions of dollars. Then came the Inner Harbor, the Convention Center, Camden Yards, and the Raven Stadium, all subsidized. Politely termed investor projects, these have never made the city a penny, but rather, let me make sure I give it to you here. See, these are the ones who bought this to you, but rather, it says it never made the city a penny, and it goes on to says again that rather it cost the city more. The city had to keep spending money to, again, bail out these so-called projects around here. So, again, they politely were termed investor projects. They have never made the city a penny, but rather cost the city revenues, even in purely financial terms, while grinding up its citizenry into a $7 to $8 an hour job. So how did Baltimore become that way? Where your unions was busted down. But don't worry, they're not finished busting your unions. They coming for you. They get ready to accelerate and eviscerate that even more. It says the Baltimore city government has spent $2 billion in building and maintaining Baltimore tourist facilities since the 1970s and hundreds of million dollars more in subsidies to tourism-related business. These cost demands continue and always remain high because to maintain itself as a tourist destination, Baltimore must constantly add something new. For example, in December 2005, the city announced an expansion to the famous aquarium featured at the Inner Harbor Tourist Center. And going to talk about again that this sequence of real estate or still estate tourist schemes began in the 1960s, and William Donald Schaefer and the financial interests launched the Greater Baltimore Committee. Now, the Greater Baltimore Corporation, its first project was the 33-acre Charles Center. And I could go on and on and on this. But again, as I said before, these are the things that the Honorable Walter P. Carter was fighting and exposing in terms of, again, how they came in and swindled Baltimore out of, again, their natural monuments, natural resources, natural public utilities from your BG&E, even sold your airport out there, William Donald Schaefer. Did you know BWI was a part of Baltimore City when it was called Friendship Airport? I'm sorry, for Larry Gibson's sake, BWI Thurgood Marshall. Let me make sure I say that now. Let me make sure I say that. Another City College graduate. Another City College graduate. But again, goes on to talk about these swindlers, man. But you can go online and read this entire PDF and some of the names that they will name from John Patarakis to some of these others in terms of how they got Harbor East, thanks to William Donald Schaefer, thanks to the like of Michael Silver or Michael Silverman, Jeffrey Levitt and the boys with the SNLs that went belly up. Then Schaefer asked Patarakis to buy it, and then the city bought it back from Patarakis with interest, and now Patarakis has all of that Harbor East, but he didn't get it on his hard work. No. They got it through lying, through cheating, through dealing, through wheeling, through stealing. That's how they got it. They got it through being subsidized. And they tell you, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and work hard, man. They didn't get Harbor East because they worked hard. They didn't get many of these subsidized hotels because they worked hard. No, they had dum-dums in place like Willie Donald Schaefer.